If you don't understand the Paschal Triduum, you're missing the center of Holy Week. Because there you're not watching 3 religious days. You're entering the very center of your faith. And that's the point that almost always gets lost. People talk about the Triduum as the big days, as the most solemn part of Holy Week, as a final stretch that's especially intense. All of that falls short, because the Triduum is not a simple increase in intensity. It is the very center of what the Church celebrates. When someone doesn't understand that, they start living these days as separate pieces. They go to the Mass of Holy Thursday, listen to the Passion on Friday, maybe attend the Easter Vigil or simply the Sunday Mass, and feel like they were present at several important moments. Yes, they were important moments, but that still isn't the full view. The problem isn't only not knowing the dates well. The deeper problem is more serious, looking at the Triduum as if it were 3 separate religious acts, when in reality the Church lives it as one great entrance into Christ's self-giving death and victory. And here is the mistake that changes everything. If you live Thursday, Friday, and Easter as isolated scenes, you break precisely the unity that the liturgy wants to show you. You're left with true parts, but you lose the thread. And without that thread, the Triduum stops being the heart of the gospel and becomes a sequence of striking celebrations. Let's go to the center from the beginning. The true meaning of the Paschal Triduum is that the Church enters, in a liturgical and sacramental way, into a single event, the Passion, the death, and the resurrection of Christ. You are not before 3 memories. You are before one same arc that unfolds step by step. That's why the word Triduum matters, but not for a technical reason. Yes, it means 3 days. But here we are not counting days like someone organizing an agenda. The Church doesn't say, now comes the first, then the second, and then the third. What it proposes is something much deeper. One single great celebration that begins with the Lord's Supper, passes through the cross, and reaches its fullness in the resurrection. That explains the tone of these days. Everything changes because you're no longer in simple preparation. During Lent, you dispose yourself, review your life, set your heart in order, do penance, pray more seriously. But when the Triduum enters, you're no longer warming up. You're already inside the core. And that begins with a very precise moment. The evening Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday. That is where the Paschal Triduum begins. That is where the Church crosses a threshold. From that moment on, it doesn't only speak to you about what Christ is going to do. It brings you fully into His hour. That detail seems small, but it isn't. Because when you understand that the Triduum begins in that Thursday evening celebration, you also understand that the Church does not see it as a decorative block added at the end of Holy Week. It sees it as the summit, as the great entrance into that for which Christ came into the world. And then the first great day appears, Holy Thursday. If you reduce it to the memory of the Last Supper, you already fell short. Because that supper is not just an emotional farewell. It is the sacramental anticipation of Christ's self-giving. It is the moment when Jesus gives His Church the Eucharist, institutes the ministerial priesthood, and reveals through the washing of the feet what form His authority will have. That day He is not improvising a ceremony, so His disciples will have a beautiful memory. He is placing before them the concrete way in which His self-giving will remain in the Church. When He takes the bread and the wine, He is not creating a metaphor. He is anticipating, sacramentally, His sacrifice. His body will be given up. His blood will be poured out. What will be consummated on the cross is already being announced and given there. That's why Holy Thursday is not only context. It is already action. It is already the real beginning of the offering. Christ does not enter the Passion as someone dragged by a destiny He does not control. He enters freely. He knows what is coming. He takes it on. He gives it. He seals it with a gesture that the Church will continue to live until the end of time. Here the priesthood is also understood better. It does not appear as an honorary position or an administrative function. It appears in the service of the Eucharist and of Christ's self-giving. If you separate those things, you distort everything. Holy Thursday does not raise up a parallel religious structure. It plants the sacramental center of the church's life. And the washing of the feet is not a nice detail to soften the scene. It is a declaration about the way Christ reigns. The teacher kneels, the Lord serves. Jesus' authority does not resemble power that dominates. It resembles love that stoops down. That gesture does not diminish his greatness. It shows it. All of that happens in a single afternoon and in a single celebration. Now you see why it's not enough to say that the Triduum begins on Thursday. It begins there because there the entire logic of self-giving is opened. But if you stay at the supper, you still haven't reached the center. Because what begins there truly bursts forth on the cross. And that's why the second great moment of the Triduum is Good Friday. Here the church changes tone in a radical way. There is no Mass. There is no consecration. The altar is bare. The liturgy becomes austere. The Passion is proclaimed. The cross is venerated. And that change does not exist to create a dramatic atmosphere. It exists because the day demands absolute gravity. Good Friday is not only the day Jesus suffers, it is the day he gives himself for the salvation of the world. That phrase has to be held with all its weight, because if you reduce it to an admirable pain, you're missing the main thing. If you look at it only as an atrocious injustice, you're also missing the main thing. Good Friday is redemptive sacrifice. The Passion is not a tragedy that ends badly. It is the moment when Christ bears the sin of the world and carries his obedience to the extreme. There you do not see only an innocent man destroyed by human violence. You see the Son freely offering himself to the Father out of love for men. That completely changes how that day is lived. Good Friday is not understood well if it only awakens sorrow. Sorrow can appear, of course. The liturgy does not remove the rawness of the cross, but it falls short if it does not reach the real level of what is happening. Because on the cross you are not before a failure. You are before the way Christ conquers. That is the scandal of Christianity. Victory passes through an execution. Kingship passes through humiliation. Love reaches its highest expression on a wooden instrument of death. That does not fit the logic of the world. That's why Good Friday never stops being an uncomfortable day. And it has to be. The veneration of the cross sums it up very well. The Church does not contemplate the cross as an archaeological piece or as a sentimental symbol. It venerates it because there the Redeemer's self-giving has taken place. That liturgical gesture does not glorify suffering in the abstract. It recognizes the concrete place where Christ carried his love to the end. Here the unity with Holy Thursday is seen clearly. What Jesus gave sacramentally at the supper, on Friday he accomplishes historically. What he said with bread and wine, he fulfills with his own blood. If you separate those 2 days, the supper becomes a memory without flesh, or the cross becomes pure violence without the light of the voluntary gift. But Good Friday also does not close the Triduum. That would be an easy mistake. Some live Friday as the great emotional climax and then let the tension drop, as if the main thing had already happened, as if Christ's death were the final point. It isn't. If you stop the Triduum at the cross, you're left with an unfinished work. That's why Holy Saturday exists. And here many people get lost, because it's a day without great visible gestures. It doesn't have Thursday's movement or Friday's public density. It's a silent day. Christ has died. The tomb holds his body. The church waits. That silence is not an uncomfortable gap between 2 more striking celebrations. It is part of the Triduum, and a decisive part, because Christian faith does not erase the passage through death. It does not rush to the resurrection as someone who avoids looking at the emptiness. It stays before the tomb. It holds the waiting. It accepts the night. There is a very hard and very concrete lesson there. Holy Saturday teaches the Church not to resolve everything in a hurry. It teaches vigilance when the way out is not yet seen. It teaches staying when hope still has no visible form. That is very difficult today. We live in a culture that wants to explain everything quickly, relieve everything quickly, close everything quickly. Holy Saturday stands in front of that anxiety and cuts it off. It forces you not to skip the silence. It forces you to understand that faith also knows how to wait. And then the Easter Vigil arrives. It is not a long and solemn Mass, as if that were its main characteristic. It is the central night of the entire Christian year. The Church lights the fire, proclaims the light of Christ, retraces the history of salvation, and announces that the Lord has risen. The whole Triduum was moving toward this. That is the key. Easter does not appear as an optimistic add-on at the end of a painful week. It appears as the culmination of the entire arc. If Thursday opens the self-giving and Friday shows the sacrifice, the vigil reveals the victory. Not a symbolic victory, not a moral improvement, a real victory over death. Here the unity is understood more strongly than ever. The resurrection does not erase the cross. It confirms it as the path of victory. What seemed like defeat is pierced by a new light. Christ is not simply an admirable martyr. He is the living one, and that completely changes the meaning of everything that came before. That is why the Church places the Easter Vigil where it places it, and gives it the weight it gives it. Not because it wants to close the week with a great ceremony, but because there the conclusion of the work is beating. If Christ does not rise, the Passion remains a tragedy. If he rises, then the cross is revealed as the path by which God has conquered sin and death. And here we arrive at the most common error with complete clarity. The error is to think that the Triduum is three very important celebrations, but separated, as if Thursday were the day of the Eucharist, Friday the day of sorrow, and Easter the day of joy, each with its own theme and fairly disconnected from the others. That reading fragments what the Church has united. If you separate supper, cross, and resurrection, you break precisely what the Triduum wants to show you. Thursday without Friday is emptied of sacrifice. Friday without Easter sinks into darkness. Easter without Thursday and without Friday becomes a joy without price or history. The Triduum exists precisely to prevent that fracture. It forces you to follow the complete thread. It shows you that the Eucharist is born from Christ's self-giving, that the cross is not a meaningless accident, and that the resurrection is not a late reward, but the victory of the same Christ who freely gave himself. That is why the Triduum is the center of the entire faith, not because it is more solemn, or longer, or more visually impressive. It is solemn because the essential is there. Christ gives himself, dies, and rises. If you remove that, Christianity is left without foundation. If you keep it only as theory, faith becomes abstract. The Triduum does something else. It places the heart of the gospel before your eyes and brings you inside it. That is its true meaning. It is not an intense add-on within Holy Week. It is not a liturgical package for practicing Catholics. It is not an especially sacred block for those who enjoy solemnity. It is the Church's great entrance into the very center of what it believes, and that also changes how you should live it. First, not as a spectator. The Triduum is not there to admire from the outside. It is there to enter into it. That means arriving prepared. If you need to go to confession, do it beforehand. If you've been dragging weeks of distraction, try to lower the noise. Don't come to these celebrations as someone who shows up late to a decisive appointment. Second, go with a clear intention. Don't attend Holy Thursday only because it's important. Enter knowing you are before the Lord's Supper and the beginning of his self-giving. Don't live Friday only from emotion. Enter knowing you are before the cross, where Christ offers his life for the salvation of the world. Don't come to the vigil as someone waiting for a beautiful celebration. Come knowing you are before the central proclamation of the Christian faith. Third, let each day lead you to the next. Don't close the meaning of Thursday within Thursday. Don't leave Friday locked in respectful sorrow. Don't receive Easter as if it starts from zero. Follow the thread. The liturgy places it before you. Your task is not to break it within yourself. Fourth, don't reduce the Triduum to custom or emotion. There will be emotion, surely, and custom, if it is good, can help you. But neither is enough. The center is elsewhere, in understanding that here the Church is not commemorating separate scenes, but entering into the event that founds it. And here it's worth saying it plainly. If you pass through the Triduum without understanding this, you can live very beautiful celebrations and still miss the main thing. You can admire the form and not enter the content. You can leave moved and still not grasp the unity of what you have seen. That's why this topic matters so much, because the Paschal Triduum does not summarize the Christian faith as a scheme. It places it before your eyes in action. It lets you see what the Church believes. It lets you hear what it proclaims. It lets you participate in the movement by which Christ gave himself, died, and rose. You are not before 3 intense days. You are before the very heart of the gospel. Supper, cross, and resurrection are not separate chapters. They are one single event that the Church makes you live in a progressive, concrete, and liturgical way. There is the key. There is the weight. There is the reason why the Triduum is not only important, it is decisive. When that is understood, the way of being in Holy Week also changes. You stop seeing the Triduum as the stronger final stretch and begin to recognize it as the summit. You stop attending out of inertia and begin to enter with greater attention. You stop fragmenting the celebrations and discover the unity that sustains them. And then, yes, the Triduum stops being a solemn word that sounds important and becomes what it really is. The Church's great entrance into the self-giving, the death, and the victory of Christ. There beats the center of everything. Don't look at it from the outside. Enter into it. Tell me in the comments which part of the Paschal Triduum impacts you the most, and subscribe to keep going deeper into the Catholic faith step by step.